Hello and welcome to In Deep with the Book of Me, and this is the April 2015 prompt. So a quick recap on how this works. So over the course of 2015 the prompts will be delivered monthly on the 1st of each month. There will be two exceptions through the year, which are April and December, when the prompts will be daily, and for those prompts the details will be released halfway through the previous month, which is mid-March and mid-November, which is why in mid-March you're now receiving the April prompt. So let's carry on. So for the A to Z prompts, so they're going to be two sets of prompts for April, and you can do any or none, or you can do both. The choice is of course yours. The reason there are two prompts is over time the Book of Me has evolved. So there are kind of two groups of people participating. There are some people who are looking at it from a genealogical perspective, in which case the genealogical A to Z will feature around best practice, awareness and a little bit more. But there's also another group of people who are new to the Book of Me, or are just starting, or want to restart from a perspective of literally just about them. So it's aimed at, but not exclusively so, non-genealogical participants, but the reality is the prompts are there. You can choose to do a mixture of all of the prompts, you can choose to do both, or you can do none. You can do as you wish with the sets of prompts, and there are two sets for your perusal throughout April. So this is just a very quick Wordle. I do like these Wordles because they give you a sense of just what something's about. So this is the genealogical A to Z, when you can see, and of course the big words there are sources, and that kind of gives you an evidence really of just how important a source is from a genealogical perspective. And the reality is actually the source is always important no matter what you're looking at. So there's just a quick, I just did the one Wordle for just an illustrative point of view really, just so that you could see what it is. But as I said, the source is of course really important. So the genealogical A to Z, I'm going to quickly run through these prompts, and don't stress about recording them or writing these down. They have already been published. They're actually already listed in the Facebook group. They are already on my blog. They are already on the website. So you will be able to pull off the prompt listings in a PDF. So this is the point of the video really, just to go through and just talk around where we see, or my perspective on the A to Z. You of course are free to use the prompts or not as you see fit. So we're going to start with A for analyse, and I think that's really important. Is as a genealogist we always look and analyse the documentation that we find. B is for bonding. Now that's kind of an interesting one really. It's actually, is it possible, or is it just a dream, to feel a bond with somebody who's perhaps been dead for 200 years? There is just sometimes where you just feel that genetic pull, perhaps. I don't know. Do you? Maybe you don't feel a genetic pull to somebody or to a location. But let's look at bonding and what it can mean to you. It could of course mean a bonding together of genealogical data. Is that, you know, as we proceed through life we are named in a variety of documentation, all of which has a genealogical perspective. Actually all those documents bond us together as individuals, so they come together to create and show a pathway of our existence. So C is for, now for this one I've done two prompts actually, two for C is for collateral and for collaborate. So collateral lines, so that's not just looking at your direct line of ancestors, perhaps you're going to look sideways too, because actually sometimes that can be as much value, perhaps even more value, of looking at your direct line. It sets the scene. So it could be that actually in order to research your ancestor you've gone sideways, you've gone to siblings, you've perhaps gone to cousins. Did a family live in the same area for a period of time? Is there a reason why there were perhaps some name changes? Or do you have 5 John Smiths, for example, because they were all cousins? It's around looking at those other lines, looking at how much more information we can gather, and looking at how those collateral lines can tell us about the way that our ancestors lived, how they lived, with whom they lived. And of course, collaborate is a true buzzword, and we have various collaborative methods of sharing information in terms of blogs. Perhaps use Evernote, and that's a really great piece of software for anybody, but it has a really good focus on collaborative genealogy work. It's also the conference theme for the God of One Name studies, and I'm just actually at the moment finishing writing my presentation for that conference, and that's looking at collaborative lines, collaborative workings, and how you can all pull together. And in fact, the Worldwide Genealogy blog is a real good example of how you can collaborate within a blogging environment. Development is D. And I think for somebody who's come through my profession and gone into learning and development, I think that is really important. And I'm sure any librarians, museum curators will all agree that we need to develop ourselves. That's how we evolve, that's how we become stronger and better equipped as we go through our professional lives. And what about once we've stopped working? Of course, every time we read something and we learn something, we've developed ourselves. But also you can look around. How is our researching developing? Is it building a picture over time? Are we becoming stronger through our development? E for evidence, absolutely key to our research, is how do we look at our evidence? Do we just look at it and think, oh yeah, it's another birth record? But do we look deeper at the evidence? Do we look at the address? Do we look at the other people, the witnesses? Do we look at the fact that it was a busy month, the fact that we look through a whole pile of parish records, for example, and we see a surge of births for, say, late October or late September? So do we look at things in a very different manner in how we analyse the evidence? F is for faith. Now that I think is really important. I don't mean around do you go to church. Look at the faith that we experience, that we belong to. Also, do we have ancestors who were perhaps of a different faith? Did they migrate as a result of escaping persecution for their faith? And also you could look at it on the other side of the coin. Could in fact be, do you have faith in the research that you've established? Or have you been handed a whole pile of genealogical material and told, this is your ancestry? Do you have faith in it? So again, there's two spins to this. G is for goals. Now that could be your to-do list effectively, and I don't know about you, but my research to-do list is huge beyond belief. And I think that's really important to understand actually is the goals. Whenever we look at a piece of research and we have a documentation and we've looked at the evidence and we've analysed it, actually everything you do, you create another 3 or 4 lines of entries onto your to-do list. But what is your goals? Do you have a goal to actually one day you want to visit India, you want to walk down the streets of Mumbai? Do you want to understand the environment, or try to understand the environment in which our ancestors lived? Do you want to go to Pennsylvania and see where the first people to the New World landed? Do you want to do those things in order to understand? So do you have a bucket list of things that you want to look at? And perhaps if you're looking at the bucket list scenario, just wait a few months before you kind of really explore that. Perhaps look at your genealogical goals and look at actually what you want to be doing in the future. H is for how. How do we research? How did our family members in the past do something? Think about what we do now and think how our ancestors did that very same task. Is it around something evolving and changing? If you look at perhaps how we do our grocery shopping, think about how, it's changed within my lifetime. Think about how it's changed in the last 100 years. Just try and get an understanding of actually how things have evolved. I is for informants, and informants probably are one of the things that are the least looked at and seen of value in any documentation. But actually, who recorded that person's death? Why did they record that person's death? Is there any reason to it? Were they just a random person? Were they a staff member at a home that looked after somebody? Were they a family member? Were they a family member that you don't know because you haven't looked at your collateral lines? J is for judgment. The biggest thing I think that we have a tendency to do from researching in the 21st century is actually we have a habit of making a judgment. And I think we need to understand that actually we cannot judge somebody else. You shouldn't judge somebody else. Perhaps it's nature to do that, but I don't think we should be doing it. There's a saying, isn't there? Don't, until you've walked a mile in my shoes, don't judge me. And I think that's probably a really good assessment, is that actually no one really knows what happens in their life or the rights and wrongs that someone else has committed to them. And I think that we need to understand a judgment. So do we judge our ancestors from the information that we've managed to glean from various bits of research? Should we judge? Can we look at a series of events and do so in such an analytical way that we don't feel that emotional link to feel a particular sense of disdain against something that we've seen or we've read? K is for keepsakes, and I think that that's a really good, we've all probably got something whereby we've inherited something that's been given to us, that's been passed down from somebody who treasured it. Perhaps it went all the way from England to the depths of Australia and is now at the home of somebody who lives in a very rural area. Think of the journey that item has taken. Think of how much it was loved and treasured to make that journey. Think about people who arrived on the Mayflower, the things they took with them. I don't just mean the things that they needed to out of necessity, but think of the things that they perhaps took that may be things that we think of perhaps as extravagant, or they maybe didn't have room for a huge amount, they probably didn't own a huge amount, but they took something with them in order to remember their loved ones by. L is for learning, and that's linked into development, I think, quite nicely. And L is for learning, it's about exploring the bits of research that perhaps we don't know a lot about. So if you've got relatives or ancestors who perhaps were nonconformists, you may need to learn about the role of a nonconformist. What actually does nonconformist mean? And I think that's, you need to look at those examples about how you can learn, how you can develop, so that you can have a better awareness when you look and analyse the evidence. Okay? Methodology. Unless you have a good method, your research will soon become chaotic. And anything that's chaotic is perhaps not a very smart way of researching. Okay, so do you have a process? So I, for example, never add anything to my genealogical program. I use Roots Magic unless I've got a trail of evidence to support that what I'm adding to my own file is absolutely right and correct. So it's around a methodology. Have you written a method statement for your research so that as you leave it to somebody else in the future that you can that it clearly explains what your methodology is? So N is for notes. So we all take notes in some way, shape or form. So, and obviously the quickest way is probably, and even in this digital age, I always keep a notebook with me. I always have a pen handy and I permanently write notes. If I listen to one of the legacy webinars, I'm always taking notes. The key thing is to use those notes. There's no point just gathering more and more notes so that it becomes a shambles and you don't use them. You don't get the real value of having taken them, and then you don't learn from it. So do you have your early genealogical notes? Are you one of these people that writes things on the back of envelopes and post-it notes, and then what do you do with it? Perhaps that links in to methodology. And then do you then organise? So do you organise those notes, or do you just have a whole pile of notebooks, post-it notes, and actually you don't really organise it? Do you even make proper notes so that you know where it came from, the date you made that note? Is it even legible? There's no point writing notes if in 30 years when someone comes to look at it again, or perhaps you go to look at it again and actually you can't read it. P is for primary source. Now you'll notice on here that underneath it's S for secondary source. And I'm going to answer that prompt, effectively, those two prompts together. So primary source, what is a primary source? What is your understanding of a primary source? A primary source is something that you have physically observed yourself. Okay, so is my birth certificate a primary source or is it a secondary source? Well, it's a primary source because the registrar, the person who notified the registrar of my birth was my mother, who clearly was there. So that's a primary source. But what about a death certificate? Is that a primary source? A death certificate can be primary, it can be secondary. And the reason I say that, and this of course is in my opinion, is that a death certificate is typically registering the death of somebody. You perhaps were present at the death, but what if you weren't present at the death? Okay, you just know that that person died and you know you were tasked with registering the death. The questions on the death certificate, so employment, that unless you know that somebody worked in the milk parlour or they worked in a solicitor's office, and actually what did they do? Were they the solicitor? Were they the assistant of the solicitor? Therefore, what is entered onto the material, onto that actual document, could in fact not be accurate. Okay, you could be, are you listing that you're a gardener? Is that because you are a world-renowned grower of geraniums, or is it because you like to potter about in a greenhouse? There's a different level, I think, of understanding. So the essential thing is, if you were there, if you witnessed something, if you took part in something, that is a primary source. Okay, if you are going to say something that is based on the words of somebody else, that is a secondary source. If I take a picture and I tell you this is of the farm where my family lived for 200 years and I don't write it on the back, that primary source will very soon become a secondary source. Because in 100 years' time, it may well be, well, she said it was this, but is it really that? So I think it's around understanding. And I think that you need to really understand, go and get a basic historical text and actually look at the definition of a primary source and a secondary source. And look at how important that is. And remember that whoever is the informant on a document, were they ever in a position to have known the information they've informed on? So I know when I was born because my mum told me. Yes, I was there, but I would have been maybe 12 or 14 inches long. I don't remember my birth, but I do have, my memory does go back to my early childhood, to say when I was 3 or 4, but I don't remember being born. So I remember my birthday because as a child you celebrate it and you know the day because somebody tells you the day. But if you have to register a birth within 5 days, as it is I think in England and Wales, actually what have you forgot? What if it was 3 foot of snow outside, or it was too cold and people couldn't be bothered to go out then? They weren't able to get themselves to the register to actually inform of the birth. They may shave some dates off to make sure they were within the 5 days so they didn't perhaps get a fine. Would they have got a fine? We don't know. But if you don't have much money, you may be worried about it. So it's about being absolutely sure. If there is no possible way that that information can be wrong, it's a primary source. Questions. Q is for questions, and as genealogists know, you answer one question and 15 more appear. And actually, what do we question? Do we question what we've told? How many of us have explored something that we've been told? And later on, perhaps after someone's passed away and we've gone through their things, we wish we had asked them so much. And I think that biggest regret that people have is they don't ask their loved ones the questions that they could have done. We were perhaps within a fraction, within living memory, something can be lost. And I think it is so important that we ask the questions. Reasoning. Is there a reasoning for the decisions that were made by somebody? Can you understand that? And I think that that's, is our reasoning enabling us to understand? We are very logical. I think most genealogists are pretty logical. Think about what you would do if you didn't have enough money, if you were living in fear, if you were in poverty. So we need to sometimes look at the reasoning of things, so then we can perhaps take a wild stab of where to look next, because sometimes actually where you think you should be looking is not where you need to look at all, and sometimes you don't look at where you should be looking. So I think sometimes we need to understand a good reasoning behind it. We've already covered secondary sources. Now let's look at trust. That could be, do you trust the research you've done? Do you trust the evidence? Do you trust the methodology that you have? Do you trust the notes you took? Do you trust the information that was given by an informant? Just think about it. Take a document, perhaps take a document that relates to your life, your birth certificate, your baptism certificate. I have a christening certificate of when I was christened, and it's wrong. It has on it my mum's middle name and not mine. In 100 years' time, should that document still survive, it will tell somebody completely the wrong information. I know it's not right because I have my birth certificate, but is that a primary or a secondary source? You have a think about it. U is for understanding. So again, we're going to use that along with reasoning. So you're going to have to understand the situation in which our ancestors lived. The choices they perhaps made. Were those... our ancestors will have made tough choices. And sometimes those choices will not really have been a choice at all. They would have been as a matter of survival. Do we understand that, or do we decide that we're going to pass judgment on them? Validation. How on earth do we manage to validate a document? Do we look at it and say this is right, or do we look at it, as in the case of my christening certificate, and say actually it's not at all right? Do we have a way of making it valid? Is there a way of actually making any of our research valid? What's the point of just researching if we're not going to share it and enable others to experience and collaborate with it? And perhaps give some validation. I recently had somebody contact me because they didn't believe that a photograph I had of their grandmother was in fact their grandmother. Until I said, well, here's the back of the picture, and on it is in my grandmother's writing. That was validation. That person didn't believe at all. So the picture they had of their grandmother was in fact somebody completely different from another part of their family. But we absolutely knew it wasn't. Therefore, it gave that person some validation. So, W. Who, what, where, when, why. We need to understand all those things in relation to our ancestors. Who they are, what they did, where they lived, when they lived there, why they did something. Why did they work on the land? Well, it's rural England. There wasn't many other choices. So it's about understanding. And I think if you have those key functional words, it gives you a sense of understanding of what our ancestors did. X marks the spot. Okay, we all say that, but the reality was, until education became a compulsory element to British life, lots of children didn't get an education. They therefore perhaps couldn't read or write, and therefore X marks the spot. But does it actually tell us that our ancestors couldn't write? Or was it that they were suspected not to have written? Did someone make an assumption that they couldn't write? Did they have a bad hand? Perhaps they couldn't write. Perhaps they physically were unable to because they had the hand in plaster, or whatever the reason. So does X marks the spot really mean couldn't write? Or does it mean something else? Does it mean they couldn't write on that day that happened? Has that person signed their name previously or after that event? Okay. Y is for you. Your research will have started with you. because that's how we learn to research our own ancestry. But how much of your life is not documented? And that's why the Book of Me has been important, is because perhaps people can choose the prompts to explore their own lives. But take a piece of paper and write about you. Obviously, you're not necessarily going to share all of this, but perhaps write the key things down. Where you went to school, what you studied at university, did you go to university, did you not go but you wanted to go? All those types of things that you can explore that define you. And you are the pivotal point of your own genealogy. And then Z is for zealous. You have a zealous for life, and you want to understand, and for your genealogy, you want to understand what it all entails. So now we're going to move along to the Book of Me Medley, which is looking at some key things that you may look at in terms of research, of how you're going to start to look at your Book of Me. So A is for an address book. Okay, I have too many address books. I certainly have my first address book, I have my mum's address book, I have my grandmother's address book. The key thing is I've gone through the address books and I've made little notes in pencil of who those people are. Were they friends of the family? Were they relatives? How were they relatives? Okay. B's for birthday book. Now I actually have a birthday book. I still manage to miss people's birthdays, but I do have a birthday book. I also have a copy of a birthday book that belonged to a cousin of a cousin, but of who, because my family is very interlinked, we have a common ancestor, and I was provided with a copy of that birthday book, and that's been really good because we only tend to send birthday cards to people or give birthday cards to people we care about, people that we think are nice. So if you've sent someone a birthday card, who are they? Why did you send them a card? So think back 100 years ago. Having a birthday book would have told you, yes, we're celebrating somebody's birth. They probably meant something to the person. Who were they? Cards. So C is for cards. So do you keep birthday cards, Christmas cards, anniversary cards? Do you scan them? Or do you just put them in the recycling and say, I'm not keeping that? Or do you keep some cards and not others? Or can you remember cards? I have a birth announcement card of somebody, not connected to my family at all, but was sent to my grandparents, probably in the early 1960s, I would think. In another 50 years, it will mean absolutely nothing unless I make a note against the back of the card or on a scanned version of the card. D is for dreams. Now, we all dream. The key thing is, do we remember those dreams? Do you keep a dream journal? Do you remember some dreams that have been so key? You've got up and you've remembered the dream and perhaps you wondered whether it was real. Or do you have dreams of what you might do in the future? E is for education, and that can be whatever level of education. It could be from when you first start school all the way through your formal education system to perhaps university, perhaps it's vocational training, perhaps you return to university as a mature student. Do you have school reports? I have all my school reports from when I was at school, and I have all my mum's, so they go back into the 1950s. Which is just wonderful. And at some point in the future, I will need to make some decisions on what will happen to them at some point. Are they going to be donated to somebody or to an archive? F is for family. How many of us grew up with aunts and uncles who weren't real aunts and uncles at all? They were honorary aunts and uncles. They were people that were respected and thought of and loved within our family unit, but they are given a title of aunt and uncle as a measure of respect. I had several of those aunts and uncles, and they did have positions of respect in our family. And in fact, one of those aunts and uncles, remained a family connection up until my aunt certainly passed away. Um, but the connection was actually back to the Second World War. So, and that family connection, family in inverted commas, lasted for 3 generations. So from my grandmother to my mum and to me. G is for gifts. So do you have a gift? Do you look at things? Look round the favourite room where you're sitting in perhaps now, and look round the room and look at something that was given to you as a gift. How is somebody going to know in the future that was given to you by X and who X was? Are they gifts that you've given people that you've really enjoyed? You enjoyed the whole process of thinking about what to buy them, of sourcing, of going through the shops, looking for what you had in your mind's eye of wanting to give somebody as a gift, and the event that you celebrated with it, with an anniversary, a confirmation, completing a university degree, whatever it was. H is for holidays. We always get 5 or 6 weeks of year where we go off and we do something, whatever that is. What do we do on those holidays? I live in a seaside town. A holiday in the town in which I now live meant very different things for people who holidayed here in, say, the 1890s compared to the 1990s. Imagine what it will be in 2090. I won't be here, I don't suppose, but it will give us an idea of the differences. What about your holidays? What can you remember doing on holiday as a child? I is for individual. We are all individual. We are all unique. We may share things with other people, genetics, hobbies, whatever it is, but we're all individual. We are absolutely unique. Unless, of course, you're a twin. But even twins are unique in some way. They don't perhaps share always everything. Or do they? Maybe you're a twin. Maybe you're going to share something that is very different from your twin. Or perhaps you are doing this with a twin. Maybe you're a triplet. I have friends who are triplets. And after 25 years, I still can't tell them apart. J is for jewellery. Have you inherited any jewellery? Things that are important or were very important, that were a prized possession of a family member. K is for kiss. Can you remember the first person you kissed? You don't have to share that with us all, but think about it. Think about the question. Does it have to be a romantic kiss? Is it perhaps a kiss that you've given to somebody? Can you remember the kiss that your grandmother used to give you as she gave you a hug, smelling of lavender? Okay, you get the idea. L is for love. Does love always mean that you're going to kiss somebody? Do you love something? I love tea, but I don't necessarily give my cup of tea a big kiss. I think it's around your view. What does love mean to you? Does it mean a connection with something or somebody? Or is it an experience? Mementos, that's a general thing. So things that have passed down from one generation to the next. Or could it be things that perhaps you have gathered that you're going to pass to another generation in the future, and the story that those mementos tell. A is for nemesis. So think about, those of you that are readers, Nemesis, I'm sure, is the title of a book written by Agatha Christie, who wrote Not Far From Where I Live, strangely enough. Who is your nemesis? O is for occasions, those special occasions that mean something to you, or occasions that meant something to a family member. And do those occasions mean something consistently? So a wedding, for example, a wedding in 2014, 2015 may cost you, let's say, £10,000. That's a huge amount of money. My grandparents got married in 1939. Not one picture of the event remains. Not one. Which is tragic, I think, because I would have loved to have seen a picture of my grandparents on their wedding day. But I do know some of the people that were at that event. I know because I was told they were there by two of the people that were there. So there I have a mixture of primary and secondary source information for those of you who have just looked into the slides already on the other set of A to Z. For those special occasions, a 21st birthday, an 18th birthday. You're coming of age at 16 perhaps when you're still a child, but there are still things that you can do that you're on the path to becoming an adult. P's for pets. So we all have pets, probably. Or we can identify with somebody who has a pet. But what about if you're on a farm? What about if your ancestors lived on a farm? Did you grow up on a farm where perhaps they're not real pets? They're animals. They live on the farm. The sheepdog actually does what it's meant to be doing. It's chasing sheep. It's bringing the sheep in. But actually, was it a pet? Is it a piece, though, of farm apparatus? Have a think about it. Cues for questions. I think we've just covered that on the previous slide, and even though I've written the other set, I actually can't remember those questions that we always want to ask and never do. Think about the questions. Perhaps have your children, if you have any children, your grandchildren, interview you. Get them to ask you 5 questions and give them the answers. And then think about the family member that you know that is perhaps your generation or perhaps one above, maybe a parent, depending on how old you are, maybe be a grandparent. Think of the same 5 questions and ask them those questions and see the comparisons. Are you right or left-handed? That's for R. I'm right-handed. I have several friends that are left-handed who are very creative. One decorates cakes incredibly. I'm very cack-handed and could never manage to decorate a cake with any degree of success. Certainly not enough to charge the fees that she charges. Are you a scrapbooker? Which is your dominant hand? Are you ambidextrous and able to use both? S is for sports. Do you play sport? Has there been a sport played perhaps that you've become keen on cricket because actually your dad played cricket, your grandfather played cricket, you watched cricket, you played for a local team? T is for trust. Who is your absolute person in your life that you trust the most and why? Perhaps jot that down. Umbrella. Think of an umbrella. Think of it open. You're going to hold the umbrella so that it's on the ground and it's open. And the pivotal point is touching the ground. That central point, who in your family is that central point? Okay? And who are the spokes coming off of those points? Is it perhaps your parents, your mum in particular, a grandparent? In the case of my own family, that spoke that's touching the ground would have been my great aunt. So my grandfather's oldest sister. She looked after her mother, who lived until she was 90, who looked after her mother, who lived until she was in her early 90s. When my aunt died in 1994, she was 94, then the umbrella started to fold a bit and become fragmented, just ever so slightly. But no matter what, when the chips are down, the people who are the spokes of that umbrella all come together to support one another. So who is your main pivotal point and who are on your spokes? V is for victory. What do you consider as the victory in your life? Something that you've perhaps done, something that you've witnessed, observed, something that perhaps you've achieved against all the odds. Who am I? Anyone who's done the previous series will know that was the very first prompt actually in series 1 was who am I, and it was define who you were. Perhaps revisit that prompt, but only after you've answered this and see if there are any differences. X marks the spot. Again, we've questioned around the fact that we can pretty much all write. Sad to say, there are still some people in the world who cannot write or perhaps write badly. Does X mark the spot? Perhaps use an example of your handwriting to illustrate that yes, you can write. Again, Y is for you. The pivotal point of any existence is us as an individual. and we become a professional, we become a mother, possibly, we become perhaps grandparents, cousins, friends, a wife, a husband, all those things that define who we are as you, linked together to W, and you will see that there are some themes here that are flowing across to the previous listing we've done, and some overlap even in this list. And Z for zest. What is your zest? What is your ding moment? The thing that just gives you an absolute zest for life. So we've now covered off 2 lots of A to Z, and I'm just very, very aware that this has now become a 40-minute presentation, and we've almost done, you will be relieved to know. So we're just going to crack on to the last few slides. So, want to take part. So how it's going to work. So each day between the 1st and the 30th of April, the letters will respond to the day of the week. Okay, so A is the 1st of the month, B is the 2nd of the month, and so forth. There are 30 days though in April, but if you remove the Sundays, you get 26 posts, which is the letters of the alphabet. Okay, so there are no posts on Sundays, and if you haven't worked that out, or you're confused or you're not sure, just look to my blog, and I've probably written and shared the post at the point you will have looked at. You can share your prompts, your responses or not as you wish, and each day on my blog, www.anglersrest.net, you will see my takes on the prompts. Now, I may have answered both, I may have answered just one. You'll have to wait and see, because as it stands at the moment, I haven't completely finished writing. Each of the prompts will be released at 12:30 AM Greenwich Mean Time. Okay, I'm in the United Kingdom, which is around about between 5 and 8 hours ahead of the States, and about 9 hours, give or take, behind Australia. Other mentions. The A to Z April Challenge is the brainchild of Arlie Bird, and the main website for that is www.a-2-z-challenge.com. The Book of Me can be found at anglers-rest.net, and click on the Book of Me. I think it's the second row down towards the middle. So we've come to a close, you'll be relieved to know. Thank you for bearing with me. It's been a long presentation, this one, and I try not to go over the 30 minutes or so, but I should go through and explain. It's quite difficult. So this just gives you an idea of what we're going to be up against for the next month. It's going to be quite fun, I think, and there will be some discussion, I hope, on the Facebook group, and I look forward to being back with you at the presentation at the end of April for the May Challenge. Enjoy the April prompts, and I will see you next month. Thanks for listening.